departed from that, and I thought I wanted to preach to you what I'm going to preach tonight in Iola. It usually ends up the other way around. If I don't preach one, then I usually whatever I preached here, I end up preaching in Iola. I don't particularly like preaching the same message twice, but there's nothing wrong with it, right? I bet you they sang that song many times, and nobody said, "Oh, can you sing another song?" But anyway, but I'm going to do this, and I think it's really good. And again, like I said, somebody asked me about the secret to a marriage relationship. For 24 years, I believe we're still happily married. Are we happily married? My wife says we are, so we're happily married. What is the secret? Somebody might say. Well, you could break it down and say, actually, the secret to any relationship is this: loyalty, commitment, right? And that sounds like a vague answer, but that's just the reality. You know, if you're going to have a good relationship, you're going to be there for the long haul. You're going to be faithful, and you're going to be loyal no matter what. And so the message this afternoon is the faithfulness of Hiram. Faithfulness of Hiram. This is in our series in Iola. I'm going through going through the Kings, 1st, 2nd Kings, and comparing Chronicles a little bit in there too. We're going to go through all that story. So we've been looking at pretty detailed life of Solomon. So we're beyond this. We're actually in like chapter 9. But in order to introduce Hiram and tell you about him, we had to go back. And so that's why I had him go to 1 Kings 5. We end up seeing this, but actually we could go back even farther than that. So go back to 2 Samuel chapter 5. 2 Samuel chapter 5. This is under the reign of David. And look at verse 10. 2 Samuel chapter 5, verse 10. And David went on and grew great, and the Lord God of hosts was with him. And Hiram, king of Tyre, sent messengers to David, and cedar trees, and carpenters, and masons, and they built David an house. And David perceived that the Lord had established him king over Israel, and that he had exalted his kingdom for his people Israel's sake. Now, God never blesses somebody without a purpose, one of his people anyway. The world might look like they're being blessed with riches or whatever, but it's not really a blessing unless it's something that God has given him for the purpose of serving him, right? Really, okay? And this was the case with David, and David looked at that. I believe David went through a time, as we know the story, where it even went to his head. Here he was a good guy, man after God's own heart, but it went to his head, all the riches and all that he had, and it caused him to make some bad decisions. But God was blessing him, and in blessing him, there were a lot of people who wanted to be his friend and wanted to, know more about him and get involved in what he was doing because they saw, God was blessing him. And one of these people that we see is Hiram. Now, Hiram, we don't know much about him in the life of David, like how good of a friend was he to David. Well, this is really all we see, is that he saw David's kingdom and he saw that God was with him and he said, you know what, I want to help him out. And so he sent him some trees and some woodworkers and some stones and some masons who would help build that. I was just noticing, I didn't notice this before, but when he was reading 1 Kings 5, it says stone quarrers. And I thought quarterers I thought that's how I was reading it. And then I said, no, actually it says quarrers. And really, I believe that's kind of the same thing. Because what they would do, and you maybe have seen this before, it's amazing what some people can do. They can take a huge stone and they can chisel it until it starts to split a little bit, and they can keep on chiseling it until that huge stone will just fall in half, and then they can do that again until they make these big cube stones, these huge bricks that they can build with, and it's impressive to see them do that, to watch people do that. Apparently, Hiram was this man, the king of Tyre there, that had a lot of people and skilled craftsmen and all, and obviously a lot of good trees that he could donate, the woodwork and the stones and the masons and all that kind of stuff. And so he took care of this in David's day. And here, I don't know how many years later exactly, but here we have Solomon now is in the building of the temple, and he's got this huge project. It took him 7 years to build the temple, 13 years to build his house and all the different things that go with that. And of course, I mentioned they're housing 1,000 wives, or 300 wives, 700 concubines. They've got to have a place to live. They're not going to all be in the same room, And so he's got to make all these provisions, and he's got to do all this. And so, Solomon's had this huge task, and we see here that he calls upon Hiram. Now, there are several times that Hiram's mentioned in this, in 1 Kings. And then we won't look at Chronicles, but pretty much Chronicles is like a second telling of this. And it's great to have two tellings because you can compare Scripture with Scripture and see some things, some details that you didn't see in Kings. You can see that when you go through Chronicles. In Chronicles, his name is spelt a little bit different, but he's mentioned in the same way. But let's look real quickly, just a few mentions of his name and see how he fares with Solomon here. In chapter 5, we see he was mentioned several times. King Hiram, it says in verse 1, king of Tyre sent his servants unto Solomon, for he had heard that they had anointed him king in the room of his father, for Hiram was ever a lover of David. I'll talk about that here in a minute. And then Solomon talks to Hiram, verse 7, it came to pass when Hiram heard the words of Solomon that he rejoiced greatly and said, Blessed be the Lord thy God this day, which hath given unto David a wise son over the great people. And Hiram sent to Solomon, saying, I have considered the things which thou sentest to me for, and I will do all thy desire concerning timber of cedar and concerning timber of fir. My servants shall bring them down to Lebanon unto the sea, and I will convey to them by the sea in floats. And he goes on about these things that he's going to do to assist Solomon. So Hiram, if it says in verse 10, gave Solomon cedar trees and fir trees according to all his desire. Verse 11, he gave 20,000 measures of wheat for food to his household. I'm sorry, Solomon gave that to Hiram. And so that Hiram's doing him a favor, but he's going to take care of him, make sure he's fed and his servants are fed and all that. He's taking care of him. Anyway, mentioned there a few times. And then in the building, some of the specific details, you get to chapter 7, verse 13, and King Solomon sent and fetched Hiram of Tyre. Let's see here. Verse 40, Hiram made the lavers and the shovels and the basins. So Hiram made an end of doing the work that was made, King Solomon, for the house of the Lord. Mentions them again in some of these shovels and basins and posts and stuff that he made in verse 45. Chapter, I think it's 10 where he's mentioned next. He's mentioned there a few times. The navy also of Hiram that brought gold and Ophir, brought in from Ophir great plenty of almug trees and precious stones. And so anyway, what I'm showing you is that Hiram, the king of Tyre, was very influential in helping Solomon to build all this stuff and to bring him that glory that he did. And so we look at that and we say, well, why did he do all that? And the main thing is he was loyal. He was loyal. Now, not to Solomon, because he didn't even know Solomon at this time. He was loyal to David, Solomon's father. So much so that he would come now and he would be a blessing to Solomon also. And we don't know, again, the relationship that he had with David, but he was loyal to him. And look there back at chapter 5 again, 1 Kings 5. And I already saw here in verse 1, at the end of the verse it says, for Hiram was ever a lover of David. Now, again, we see in verse 10, Hiram gave Solomon, these cedar trees and fir trees according to his desire. And then it says, it says in verse 12, the Lord gave Solomon wisdom as he promised him, and there was peace between Hiram and Solomon, and they two made a league. Okay, so they got together, and he said, hey, I'm going to be here for you. I'm going to take care of you. If you need help, I'm here to help you. If you need something, He praised the Lord, it said, because he saw that God had raised a son of David who was wise, and he's blessing him and all that. And Hiram said, I'm going to get in on this, right? Because I love David, his father, and I'm going to help him, and I'm going to take care of him. All right, now let me make a little application on this point. So Hiram was a good friend of David. Now, David made some mistakes for sure. We'll talk about that in a minute, but David was a good friend to have. Look at David's loyalty. If you go back through the stories and you see how loyal he was to Saul, even when Saul was trying to kill him, he was loyal. He was loyal to Jonathan. He was loyal to all those. Now, there were some times where somebody turned on him and maybe he had to do something, but a lot of those, even Joab, people like that, even Shimeon, who was throwing rocks at him, he didn't retaliate on any of those. He actually saved it for his son, and then Solomon actually ends up putting these people to death, which is kind of interesting because the reason David doesn't build the temple and he waits for his son is because it says that he was a bloody man. Now, Solomon just told Tyre, he said, you know how my dad he couldn't build the temple because he had war on every side of him and all that kind of stuff. And that was Solomon's telling of the story. But if you read this, what I think a big part of David being a bloody man is his shedding of innocent blood, right, on Uriah the Hittite. And so, I think that's more of it. Not just so much that he went to war or that he had somebody put to death, because look, by this time in the story, Solomon had already put several people to death. There was blood on his hands as well, but he did it as part of the king, running the kingdom and making wise choices, and it was something that kings had to do. Whereas David, he made some of those same things, and obviously he killed a lot of Philistines and he did all this, but it was doing the work of the Lord. But there were some times, again, once the kingdom started going to his head, the power and the riches and all that went to his head. We see he went through this time where he got extra violent. He started doing some things he shouldn't have done. We see where he was supposed to be going out to war. He doesn't go out to war. Instead, he finds himself at home. He begins to look and he lusts after a woman, Bathsheba, ends up having a child with her, and then putting her husband to death. You know the story, how that goes. So I believe that's the main reason why God said, no, we'll let your son build the temple. We'll go ahead and do it as you planned, but we'll let your son do it because you're a bloody man. I don't want you to do that. And so anyway, other than those mistakes that he made, though, if you think about it, man, he was loyal. He was a good friend. He wasn't so good with his wives or his children, right? But he was loyal to them nonetheless. I mean, look at Absalom. Was going to take the kingdom from him, and he loved him. He was overly, sympathetic with him. And, later on when, he's got other sons trying to get the kingdom, and he's overly sympathetic and all that kind of stuff because of his faithfulness. Now, sometimes faithfulness and loving somebody the way you're supposed to love them doesn't mean just letting them have whatever they want and not punishing them or whatever. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm just saying that if you wanted to have a good friend, David was the man. David was the man that was going to be there for you. He was going to help you. And even though he got into trouble, his heart was definitely one of somebody who loved the Lord and wanted to see God's kingdom flourish and what have you. And so, obviously, if we're going to pick friends, if we're going to get relationships with anybody, how about the person that we're going to marry? The person that we're going to marry better be someone that loves the Lord. It ought to be somebody, if you're going to make that commitment to be loyal to them, it better be somebody who you're willing to be loyal to, right? Because after you get married to them, you need to be loyal no matter what. And so you better pick the right one to begin with. Okay, so, but that's true for friends. You want to make a good friend. I'm talking about the type of friend who you say, hey, I want to help this person. I want to bless them. I want them to be blessed by the Lord and to be able to kind of have more opportunity to do great things and see their name lifted up and all that kind of stuff. You want to get behind that person. You want to make sure it's a good person to get behind, okay? But be loyal for sure. Hiram was a good friend of David, even if David didn't know it. I really don't know if he did or not, but obviously he was there. Look at Proverbs 17. Show you a couple verses on about being a friend and being loyal to somebody. Proverbs chapter 17, verse 17. A friend loveth at all times, and a brother is born for adversity. Now, when I first became the pastor, have you ever done the read a proverb a day for 30 days? You know, every month you can just read a proverb, and you know which one to read because whatever day of the day it is, that's the one that you read. Well, when I first became the pastor, I did a series where on Wednesday nights, whatever verse was going to land, whatever proverb was going to land on that Wednesday, that's what I would preach. And so I'd have to look ahead, obviously know what day that's going to land on, and then I'll study that. And so they would read, the idea was you read that proverb, and then I'm going to preach on it. And I remember going through this, and I kind of remember looking at this, and I was a little confused because it seems like it's saying, you know, a friend, let me read it again. A friend loveth at all times. And then I thought maybe this was an opposite, but a brother is born for adversity. And I thought, man, you know, a friend's going to love you, but a brother is going to be your enemy. That's kind of what I was thinking when I first read that. But that's not what it says. I don't think that's what it's saying. I think it's actually saying the same thing, like a friend loveth at all times. And also, a brother is born for adversity. In other words, a brother's going to be there for you when the adversary comes. You know, he's born for adversity to be there at that time. That's the way it should be. Not always that way, I realize, but that's the way it should be. And even brothers that don't get along, you know, I'm sure there's some people here that have brothers that could testify to this. Probably the one that you fight with the most, but the one that you're always going to be there to get their back whenever they, you know, because of loyalty. Okay, and that's how friends ought to be. A friend loveth at all times. Okay, look at chapter 18. You're in Proverbs 18, verse 24. A man that hath friends must show himself friendly, and there is a friend that sticketh closer than a brother. So if my first thought about that was true, about a friend being born for adversity, like there is some truth here because it says, hey, there is a friend that sticketh closer than a brother. And we know that could also be applied to the Lord, who was a friend that laid down his life for us. Greater love hath no man than this. But if you're going to be a friend to somebody, you got to show yourself friendly. And there is a friend that sticketh closer even than a brother. Okay, look at 1 Corinthians 13. 1 Corinthians 13, verse 7. And this is that great charity chapter. It's giving a list of characteristics of charity. Charity suffereth long and is kind and all these things. Look at verse 7. Beareth all things, believeth all things, hopeth all things, endureth all things. Like if you have love for somebody, you know, you're going to give them the benefit of the doubt as much as possible. You're going to be there to endure things, even if there are things that aren't pleasant. You're going to be there in the good times, the bad times, and all that. Okay, that's the reality. That's what it means to love somebody and to be loyal to them. It's nice to have friends, but we want to make sure that the friends that we have are people who we are willing to be loyal and commit to some loyalty. Now, obviously, we're not talking about being loyal to a friend more than we are to God, right? Because there are some people that are like, hey, I will stand behind my friend. Friend gets in trouble and they just like have their friend's back. And it's like, wait. You got to be a friend to God first and foremost. And then still be loyal to your friend. But so I've always put it this way, like I want to be loyal, but not mafia loyal. You know what I mean? Like the mafia, the mobsters, you know, the gangs or whatever. It's like, hey, they're so loyal, like they'll go to death. They don't matter what's right and wrong. You know, they'll put a hit out on somebody, and it's like, hey, I'm loyal to them. I got to do it. And so they'll kill somebody. And we're just talking about recently how they do that in jail. Like people will go in there with like maybe a 2-year sentence, and then they'll join some kind of gang because you're kind of forced to be in a gang. And then they'll end up with like a 20-year sentence because they'll kill somebody while they're in there because the gang made them do it. Look, I'm not that loyal. You know, I want to be loyal to God. I want to be loyal to those people in my life who God's put there, and I'll be loyal as much as I possibly can. But that doesn't mean that I'm going to be more loyal to them than to God. Does that make sense? So that's not what we're talking about. But loyalty is a big thing, and it's a needed thing. So because this is a little bit selfish, but you know, because you pick a person who God is blessing and God is using, and God is going to give them what they need to be able to accomplish their work. If you find somebody like that and say, this person has got the blessing of God, this person's got a heart and he's got the mind, God's like going to use them or whatever. Look, I want to be a friend to that person. And one person is because, one reason is because I love the Lord, and so I love those people that are wanting to serve the Lord. But I'll tell you another reason is a little bit selfish. It's like, if God's blessing them, I want to be in on their team, you know what I mean? So I reap some of those blessings as well. And that's maybe a little selfish, but that's true. Like, that makes sense. Like, why would you want to be friends with somebody who God is against and God's not blessing them? Don't you want to be on the side of those who are experiencing the riches of God? I want to be on that team. That's the person that I want to be loyal to. Because even in their down, I know their heart and I know that they love the Lord, and I want to be loyal to them and lift them back up because I know there's somebody that could do something great for the Lord. Yeah, I want to be part of that. And so maybe it sounds a little selfish, but that's another reason to be a good friend to a man like David. Okay, but also, we want to help God's people because we love God. And like I think of the people in this room, the soul winners and people that love the Lord. And man, I want to see this work grow. Not so that anybody can be patted on the back or whatever, but because I want to see people in Kansas City saved. Great work for the Lord happening, lives changed, and people getting right with the Lord. I want to see all that, so therefore I want to invest in the people that are doing that. And like Hiram, I want to be a friend to people like David. And so we all ought to have that mindset. But loyalty continues. Look at this. Even in times where it might not seem like that person's being blessed. I mean, what kind of friend, like what do they call it, fair weather friend? Like, what kind of friend would it be if, like, you're like, oh, David, yeah, he's a hero. Man, I would do anything for David. He's like my best friend. And then he falls into sin, and it's just kind of like, ooh, that's embarrassing. And then all of a sudden, like, you're not a friend of David anymore. And when someone's talking to him, it's just like, that guy. You're like, I used to be his friend. But, well, that says a lot about you then, right? Because you don't want to be a fair weather friend. You want to be someone who's loyal to your friends and say, hey, look, this is a person who loves the Lord. This is a person that I've committed. I've knitted my soul with this person like Jonathan and David. I want to be a friend of this person, and I want to help them through these rough times. And I want to get them to the point where they're serving the Lord again, because that's going to benefit all of us. And that's the way a friend should be. So Hiram was that kind of friend to David. At this point, David had done some bad things. In fact, David is even dead and gone. So what is it actually going to help Hiram, to bless Solomon? Why would it matter? Like, David's already gone. Why are you trying to impress David? Well, it wasn't that. It was the fact that he was loyal to David. And he said, David did the same thing. He said, I want to bless the household of Saul, because he was loyal to Saul. And he tried to find somebody who Saul left behind, and he said, I want to bless these people. And so that was his motivation. And so here's an application we can make about that is don't bail on a friend when they need you the most. Don't bail on somebody whenever they're down. Don't bail on somebody whenever they're gone and passed away. Be a voice for that person and be there for them. Be there for their name. Be loyal. That's loyal. I mean, it doesn't change. It doesn't change depending on the conditions of the time, okay? So, number one, Hiram was a friend of David. Number two, Hiram was happy to be a help. He was happy to help Solomon simply because David was Solomon was David's son. Now, I suppose that he got some benefit of aligning himself with Solomon, right? Obviously, everybody's going to come to the kingdom later on and say, oh, Solomon, this is the greatest king that ever lived. Look how, fancy this kingdom is, and how in a couple chapters here, the Queen of Sheba is going to come, and there's not going to be any spirit left in her. It's going to take her breath away when she sees the kingdom of Solomon. And so I guess at that time, then Hiram being a friend and being in alliance with Solomon and everything, I guess that will have benefited Hiram a little bit. But the opposite, the opposite is true too. Solomon benefited from Hiram, and yet Hiram gets not really any credit. Now, he's mentioned several times in the Bible, but people didn't go around marveling at the kingdom of Solomon and saying, wow, Hiram is just such a great man, and look what he provided, and look at all the things that he did, and look at all the great things in his kingdom, and all this gold and all these stones, the stonework and this woodwork and all that. That came from Hiram's kingdom, the king of Tyre. Now, the kingdom of Tyre was an impressive nation, no doubt. But in this case, you get the idea as you're reading this that Hiram kind of took a back seat. And Hiram said, I'm going to be there to bless Solomon and to bless his kingdom. And Solomon ends up getting all the glory from this. Look at 1 Kings 5, 7 through 12 again. And it came to pass when Hiram heard the words of Solomon that he rejoiced greatly and said, Blessed be the Lord this day, which hath given David a wise son over this great people. And Hiram sent to Solomon, saying, I have considered the thing which thou hast sentest to me for, and I will do all thy desire concerning timber of cedar and concerning timber of fir. My servants shall bring them down from Lebanon unto the sea, and I will convey them by sea in floats unto the place that thou shalt appoint me, and I will cause them to be discharged there, and thou shalt receive them, and thou shalt accomplish my desire in giving food for my household. And of course, that's what we talked about, how he feeds them and takes care of them while he's doing this. But he's doing it all for Solomon. And he ends up, really being a blessing to Solomon's kingdom there. Now, it doesn't seem like in any way that Hiram was doing this all for his own benefit, but simply because he loved David and he loved what David stood for. So here's the application I want to make in this point. We don't have to do things for people for what we're going to get in return. Now, that's easy to say, and I think everybody knows that, and everybody wants that to be the case, but it seems like it's so easy for us when we do something for somebody to expect that they're going to do something in return for us. And we don't have to expect something from somebody. It's okay to do something for somebody and get no credit for it. They don't even have to know you did it. You can do something for somebody just because you love them and then back off from the scenes, not let anybody know, and just rejoice in the fact that that person is prospering, that person is being blessed, that person enjoyed maybe the gift that you gave them or whatever, and you didn't need anything in return from that. That's what true loyalty is. That's what true friendship, a good relationship, whether it's your spouse or your boss or whatever it is that you have committed yourself to be loyal to. They don't have to do something to bring, you pleasure. You don't have to get something in return. It's okay to be a friend to somebody who isn't going to reciprocate that. It's okay if you're a friend with somebody. Look at this. If you're a friend of somebody and being a friend of that person makes a whole lot of other people not want to be your friend. I've lived through this a little bit. I'm not saying like I've received a whole lot of flack or something, but I know that there was a particular person who I felt like, still do feel like, is serving the Lord. And I said, I'm going to be a friend of this preacher. I'm going to be a friend to him because I love what they're doing for the Lord. I want to bless them. I want to say good things about them. I want to defend them, back them up, and all that kind of stuff. And you know what? As a result, I lost a lot of friends. There were a lot of people who I thought were my friends who said, if you're going to be with that guy, I don't want anything to do with you. You know what I thought about that? Well, that's their loss, because I have committed myself to be a friend to this person because I think that they're standing for God. I think they got a good heart, and I'm going to be there for them, ups and downs, and I'm going to be there. And the reality is, you got to have that. If you don't have that attitude, then you're really not probably interested in being somebody's friend. You're just trying to see what you can get out of it. Okay, so if you're a friend of somebody and all of a sudden you start losing friends, so you're just going, oh, maybe I shouldn't be a friend of that person. There's something wrong there. You never were a friend of that person. Okay, and so we don't need to get gain from somebody. We don't have to get benefited from somebody. We can lose other people and other contacts. About that situation, I had a preacher say, well, I'm not necessarily going to disown you around here, but you're probably never going to preach at anybody's church. You're probably not going to preach at camp or all these things that when I first became a pastor, there was all these kind of promises, not that I ever asked for any of that, but all these promises like, hey, there's potential here, and you got a good future ahead of you, and we're going to help you do this, and we're going to be behind you for that. As soon as I made this friend, it was just like, nope, you know what? We don't even want to be attached to your name because of this. And I thought, that's not going to change my mind. You're not going to make me be disloyal to somebody because you all of a sudden decided you're not going to be loyal to me because of my friend. And that's what I decided to do. So look, you don't have to worry about gaining, benefiting from somebody in order. I mean, that's not, here's what bothered me in a lot of circles of preachers that I've ever been involved in. Okay. And I don't know, I'm not a super popular guy. I don't have a whole lot to offer people. Like, I'm not just some great, I don't know. I don't know what preachers are even looking for, okay? But I don't have a whole lot to offer a lot of preachers. But I'd go to preachers' meetings, and here's what I would get. Hey, Rocky, how are you doing? And they're looking at the big preacher that's got all the meetings and has the big church and all that. Hey, how are you doing? All right, I'll get back to you later. And then they'd go over there, rub elbows with the big shot. You know what I mean? I felt that my whole life. I watched them do that with other preachers, and I'm like, man, that's not being a friend. That's not being a friend. That's like, I'll be your friend if you do something for me. I'll be your friend if it benefits me. I'll be your friend if that's going to cause me to have other friends. None of that is friendship. None of that is loyalty. Loyalty is like, I'm going to be your friend no matter what. I'm going to be there for you no matter what. I'm going to be there for you if it makes me, very unpopular, if it makes me not have friends or whatever, that doesn't matter. And this was the kind of people, this was the kind of relationship I feel like he had here with David. He's like, I'm gonna help David no matter what. I'm gonna help Solomon. I don't get the impression that he was at all trying to gain from it. Okay, but here's the last point that I want to make. Hiram continued to help Solomon, even though he felt Solomon had wronged him. Okay, go to chapter 9. 1 Kings chapter 9. I didn't mean to get this message was not meant to be a personal thing. It just kind of jumped out of my mind whenever I was saying it, okay? So don't think that I'm trying to preach my own feelings or something like that. Okay, look at chapter 9, verse 12. And Hiram came out from Tyre to see the cities which Solomon had given him, and they pleased him not. Was he just selfish? Like he just wasn't happy because Solomon said, hey, for all the stuff you did for me, I'm going to give you these cities. And then he saw the cities and said, that's not good enough. Was it just that kind of an attitude? I don't think so. I think Solomon actually gave him a bum deal. I think he gave him some wasted land that wasn't really that good for anything. And here it says, Hiram came from Tyre to see the cities which Solomon had given him, and they pleased him not. And he said, what cities are these which thou hast given me, my brother? And he called them the land of Cabul unto this day. And apparently the Cabul must mean something along the lines of good for nothing. Okay, if you look it up, that's what everybody says. Makes sense in this context. It's just good for nothing. This land you gave me is just desolate. It's not really that good for anything. But look at verse 14. And Hiram sent to the king 60 talents of gold. Look at, let me see here. Look at chapter 9, verse 14. No, I just said that. Look at verse 27. And Hiram sent in the navy, his servants, shipmen that had knowledge of the sea, with the servants of Solomon. And they came to Ophir and fetched from thence gold 420 talents and brought it to King Solomon. It's interesting to me as I read through this, Hiram could have very easily been like, man, I did all that work for you, Solomon. Like I was loyal to you. I did all these things. I helped you out. And you said, hey, you're gonna reward me for that. And then you give me these useless cities. And he could have been like, that's it. No more alliance. Not a friend with you anymore. I don't like what you gave me. And then just been done. But no, the next verse, you see all of a sudden he's giving to him. And he's sending him things and he's sending him money. Why are you doing that? Because I told him I was going to. Because I'm his friend. Because I'm in an alliance with him. I'm faithful to him. I'm loyal to him. That's what I see here. Look at 2 Chronicles 8. Again, this is just the same story. It's just in a different book. In case you never heard me say this, I say it a lot, but the Bible obviously is such a miraculous book. It's such an amazing book. And one of the great things about the Bible is the fact that one man, as opposed to some other quote-unquote holy books, one man didn't just sit down and write the Bible and be like, hey, this is the Word of God, and everybody has to just believe that. But actually, he used like over 40 authors, and they pin things down, and it's just amazing how they all match up. But they don't match up perfectly. If they matched up perfectly, then there would be reason to believe, hey, these guys just copied off of each other, right? But they don't. They're just eyewitness accounts that tell the story from their perspective. And then whenever you compare the two, you're like, okay, they're telling the same story. They got a lot of the same details. They just saw it from a different perspective. And so the Bible, and I could point out so many cases where that happens. Okay, one thing that always jumps out in my mind is the book of Revelation. The book of Revelation, once you get to chapter 12, it kind of like starts telling the story all over again from a different perspective. And so it helps you as you read the first chapter. You're like, well, I don't completely understand what happened in this. If you understand that the second half of Revelation just tells the story all over again, and you read it from that perspective, you're like, oh, now that makes sense. Now I see what was going on during the trumpet, the blowing of the trumpet, or now that I see. And so that really helps. And then you got Exodus, but then you also have Deuteronomy. Then you have Kings, but you also have Chronicles. And I could go on and on, but there's so many places where you see that God kind of built in these parallel passages and these scriptures that you can compare with other scripture, and it gives you an understanding of what happened. Also helps you to explain words, like there's a built-in dictionary here, and God's word's amazing. Okay, and when people say, well, yeah, like we were soul winning the other day, and this guy said, well, I believe some parts of the Bible, but I just can't trust it all because it's been rewritten so many times and all this kind of stuff. All that shows is they have an absolute lack of understanding of how the Bible was preserved over the years. Okay, because the truth is, no, you can go back to manuscripts from this region and how they match up with these manuscripts all the way from this other region. And there's copies of that, and people have copied those copies and those copies. And look, you cannot say that somebody just rewrote the Bible. Now, we can stand as King James only, and we can say, yeah, the modern versions have changed things. But even then, I'm going to be honest with you, it doesn't change it to the extent that somebody would say, well, I don't know, man, it's just rewriting the Bible. Okay? Now, there are some corruptions that have gone into the modern versions. But we don't use the modern version anyway. So anyway, whenever somebody uses that whole, well, it's been rewritten, which version do you use? Which edition do you? Oh, King James? Which edition of the King James? Look, all they're doing is showing you that they don't know anything about the preservation of the Bible. Okay? And I'm not saying I'm an expert on it, but I'm just saying, like, once you start studying just a little bit, you're just like, there's no doubt about it. The hand of God, the finger of God was upon this book. And so anyway, I got off on a tangent for sure, but 2 Chronicles is telling the same story that we read in Kings, and that's a blessing that we get that story again. Look at 2 Chronicles chapter 8, verse 2. Let's start with verse 1. And it came to pass at the end of 20 years, wherein Solomon had built the house of the Lord and his own house, that the cities which Hiram had restored to Solomon built them and caused the children of Israel to dwell there. It looks to me like Hiram returned those cities. Solomon said, you know what, for all the work you did, I'm going to give you these cities. And Hiram said, those cities aren't good for anything. I'm not going to take the time to build those and do all that stuff. And so he gave them right back to him. And then he built them, and then he put some of the Israelites in there. Okay? And then, as we read the story, Hiram continues to serve him and to be loyal to him and help him and all that stuff. He gave the gift that he gave it back to him, said, hey, look, I can't use that. And he gave it back to him, and it benefited Solomon. But he continued on, and he continued to serve. He still helped him even after the fact. And so once again, just application here is that friendship doesn't have to end, it shouldn't end when that friend does you wrong. Like if your friend, gave you the short end of the stick, I don't even know what that means. I mean, I kind of do, but I don't know why I said that. When your friend gives you a bum deal, when your friend like ends up to kind of let you down a little bit, so what? Be a friend. Be a friend. That's going to happen in your marriage. That's going to happen in every relationship you have in your life. They're going to let you down. You know, I remember whenever I was a kid, even letting my parents down and doing something. Maybe I got caught in a lie, or maybe I got caught doing something. And I remember thinking in my head, my parents are never going to trust me again. I just blew it. Like, I'm not a good son. They're not going to trust me and all that. And then, you know what? Like, hours later, everything's like right back to normal. They're loving me. They're providing, you know what I mean? Because you say, well, that's normal because that's a relationship a parent has towards a child. They're going to be loyal. They're going to be faithful no matter what. Well, exactly. That's how our relationship should be with those people that we love. We should be loyal no matter. Make it clear again that being loyal to somebody doesn't mean go ahead and tolerating things that are destroying them or tolerating evil things that they're doing against the Lord. No, because we're loyal to the Lord first and foremost. But that doesn't mean we hate that person or we turn our backs on that person. You know, here's when a friend, you know, there's a friendship established. All right, let's go ahead and use husband and wife. Okay, they're loyal to each other till death do us part. You know, there's nothing that can separate us. And then 5 years down the road, they're divorced. Okay? And what happens is, now that they're divorced, that person's saying, yeah, my spouse this and my spouse that, and they're talking dirt on them and all this kind of stuff. And it's, whoa, whoa, whoa. You know, when you were married, like this person was like the greatest thing, and they treated you right, and they did all those things. And all of a sudden, because they did you wrong, you're like, well, I got to get even with them. That's not loyalty. That's not loyalty. Loyalty is saying, you know, you never should have divorced anyway if you could have prevented it. But loyalty is saying, look, I'm going to preserve that person's name. I'm going to respect their name. I'm not going to talk dirt on them and all that kind of stuff because I love them. A friendship is that way. You know, if my pastor friend that I was talking about a minute ago, you know, if he decided, hey, I don't want anything to do with this guy anymore, he's not my friend anymore, you know what? That's not going to stop me from being a friend. Now, he might not want to, I'm not going to. Now, don't be a weirdo and start like stalking somebody or something like that. That's kind of weird, okay? But love that person enough to be like, you know what? They don't want me to be their friend anymore. You know, I'm still going to do them good. I'm not going to go out and make a bunch of videos and bash this person's name and try to raise up a group of people to throw dirt on him and see if we can catch him in something. Look, this is my friend. This is my friend. I you know, I don't like the fact that, you know, certain things happen or he doesn't want to be my friend anymore. But he's my friend. I'm not gonna stab him in the back. You see what I'm saying? And that's how we got to be as friends. Again, take it off of my personal illustration. It's just what's in my mind right now. But you've got friends in your life. You've got relationships in your life that you have to let things go. This person did me wrong. I'm gonna go ahead and love them anyway. And you just let that go so that it doesn't break that friendship and break that opportunity you have to encourage each other in the Lord and to accomplish great things for the Lord. Okay, so let me just give you some conclusions from this message. First of all, pick the right people to be loyal to. Okay, because I believe once you commit to be loyal to somebody, you ought to just continue to be loyal to them. Like I said, unless they're bringing dishonor to the Lord and you have to separate from them for that reason, but still honoring them and being as loyal to them as you can. A great example, again, is David with Saul. You know, Saul was trying to kill him, and he was still loyal. He was still saying, you know, rebuking those people who would speak bad about the man that's trying to kill him. And that just shows his loyalty. Okay, but pick the right people. If you can pick who your friends are, who you're going to hang out with, who you're going to be loyal to, you know, why would a gang member want to be loyal to a bunch of thugs that are probably going to get them thrown in jail, probably going to get them addicted to drugs and get them in trouble and add 20 years to their sentence? I mean, all these things that I'm talking about. Why would you want to be loyal to that crowd? But you know, there are people that are so loyal to a gang that, I mean, it puts Christians to shame. I'm not saying, I don't think you should be loyal to people that are doing evil against God, but I'm saying the amount of loyalty they demonstrate to each other will put some Christians to shame, because Christians, you know, will turn on each other in a moment, whereas some of these gang members would they would go to jail, they would take the hit for somebody, they would do all these things. I don't want to be I don't want to be mafia loyal, but you see what I'm saying? We need to understand that we need to be loyal to each other. And then when you're loyal to somebody and you're a friend to somebody, don't expect anything in return. That's not what being a friend's about. Now you might, it's nice, and they probably will reciprocate that. If you're a friend to them, that's just kind of natural that you love that person who's been a friend to you, and you're going to want to show them friendship as well. Again, I'm supposed to be doing a series on the family anyway, so let me just use the husband and wife situation. If a wife will decide, I'm going to love my husband even when he's a jerk, and I'm going to obey him, submit myself to his authority, even whenever I think he's making bad decisions. Even whenever it seems like he doesn't love me and he's not taking care of me, whatever, I'm going to submit myself to him anyway. You know what will happen 9 times out of 10? I mean, unless he's a real jerk, like monster of a jerk, he's going to see his wife's loyalty and the fact that his wife loves him enough to do all those kinds of things, and he's going to start showing love. And he's going to start going out of his way to treat the woman right because of the fact that she's showing her love to him. And the opposite is true too. A husband should be like, I'm going to love my wife even if she's not providing what I think she should be providing and doing the things that she should be doing or whatever. I'm going to continue to love them and continue to be with them because I'm loyal to them. Till death do us part. Not more loyal to them than I am to God. Yeah, even your spouse. Don't be more loyal to them than you are to God, but be loyal for sure. And then finally, be loyal even whenever they do you wrong. I guess that kind of went with the last point as well. Be loyal even when somebody does you wrong. Be right with God. Give it to Him. And then do the best you can to love people and be loyal to them. And I believe God will bless you for it. Little example from the faithfulness of Hiram. Let's go, Lord, in prayer. Father, I thank you for friends. I thank you for the friendship that you've given through Jesus Christ. And he even said that he was a friend to us. And also said if we're his friends, we should keep his commandments. And I pray, Lord, that you'll help us first and foremost be loyal to Christ and loyal to our Lord. But then also, Father, I pray you establish relationships in our lives, whether it's marriages, friends, and brothers and sisters in Christ, whatever the case, even bosses, Lord, those kind of relationships. Give us, Lord, the fortitude to be able to be faithful no matter what, and to be loyal to those who we've decided to be loyal to for the right reasons. And I pray that you'll bless in our lives for having that faithfulness, and that you would reciprocate that to us if you so choose, Lord, that we might be blessed for having that kind of attitude, which I feel like you've demonstrated in your word that you want us to have. Lord, help us to be faithful, help us to be loyal, and I pray that you would be glorified first and foremost in it all. In Jesus' name I pray, amen.